Welcome to Hollywood Latest Reports. It was a sight no one ever thought they'd witness so soon. Thousands upon thousands of devoted followers, longtime fans, fellow evangelists, and heartbroken family members all flocking to the legendary Family Worship Center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The occasion? A monumental gathering in honor of Jimmy Swaggart, the legendary televangelist, singer, and preacher, whose name has been etched into the foundation of modern American Christian ministry for decades. What was supposed to be just another Sunday service quickly transformed into a historic tribute. It was a moment that transcended denomination, race, and belief system. People came from every corner of the nation, and even some from across the globe, to pay their respects, bring their prayers, and say their goodbyes to the man who shaped their faith journey. The air outside the Family Worship Center was thick with emotion. Long lines stretched across the church parking lot as people held candles, posters, old photographs, and tattered Bibles, many of which had Jimmy Swaggart's name written on the inside cover from decades ago. Some carried guitars in reference to his iconic gospel performances. Others wore vintage Jimmy Swaggart Ministries t-shirts, holding up signs that read, "Thank you, Brother Swaggart, and you changed my life." As church bells rang out solemnly in the background, the murmur of prayers could be heard from clusters of attendees, all quietly reflecting on what the day truly meant. Inside, the sanctuary was unlike anything it had ever seen. Cameras rolled, gospel choirs wept while singing, and flowers covered the stage from end to end. A large screen projected vintage clips of Jimmy Swaggart's most memorable sermons, stirring waves of nostalgia and emotion from every person in the pews. People sat in stunned silence, others in whispered prayer. Some stood, raising their hands to the heavens in worship, while others quietly sobbed into their palms, visibly crushed by the weight of the moment. And then, the music started. A slow rendition of "I'll Never Be Lonely Again," one of Swaggart's most iconic songs, echoed through the church. Performed by the church choir with violins and piano accompaniment, the song struck a deep chord. The lyrics poured over the congregation like a healing balm. "Now I have Jesus with me, my dear friend. I'll never be lonely again." Many began to cry openly. There were no egos in the room, no barriers, only a collective expression of love and grief. Frances Swaggart, his wife and lifelong partner in ministry, sat front and center, dressed in solemn black. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she clutched a tissue. When she finally stood to speak, the entire church hushed. Every camera turned toward her, and every ear strained to hear what she would say. Her voice cracked almost immediately as she looked around the room. "He loved you all," she began softly, "more than you will ever know. Jimmy gave his life to the Lord and to you, and this gathering, this love you've shown here today, he would be so humble." The moment she finished, a thunderous standing ovation erupted. People didn't just clap, they cried while clapping. Many began shouting, "We love you, Frances, and God bless you," as she stood there wiping her tears. What was most moving was that Frances didn't just deliver a rehearsed eulogy. She shared stories, some humorous, some gut-wrenching, about the man she loved, who many only knew from behind a pulpit or on a TV screen. One story in particular hit hard. Frances recounted a moment in their early ministry when they were living in a one-bedroom trailer with barely enough money to put food on the table. Jimmy, exhausted from a long revival meeting, sat on the edge of their bed crying, not from defeat but from joy, saying, "If we win just one soul tonight, it was worth it." That raw passion, that determination to serve God regardless of material reward, defined Jimmy Swaggart's entire legacy. Then came Donnie Swaggart, Jimmy's only son, who had preached alongside his father for decades, choking back tears. Donnie said, "My dad was more than a preacher, he was a spiritual warrior. He didn't just teach people how to walk with God, he showed them by example." Donnie also shared the heartbreaking moment he received the call that his father had been rushed to the hospital. "We knew time was running out," he said, "but we prayed for a miracle anyway." The audience nodded in unified heartbreak. Many of them had been following updates about Jimmy's health in the days prior. Rumors had spread rapidly online, with many fearing the worst. Social media was flooded with hashtags like #PrayForSwaggart and #JimmyForever. Churches across the nation had organized prayer vigils, and even Christian celebrities like Kirk Franklin, CeCe Winans, and Joel Osteen had taken to social platforms to offer public prayer. In one particularly touching moment during the tribute, the choir broke into the old hymn, "It Is Well With My Soul." Audience members, many who had grown up singing the very same hymn under Jimmy's spiritual influence, joined in softly. By the second verse, the entire church was singing in unison. The sound was thunderous, soul-shaking and spiritual, like a collective cry to heaven. Perhaps the most shocking moment came when a video began playing unexpectedly on the screen. It was Jimmy himself, a pre-recorded message he had apparently filmed weeks before his health began declining. In the video he looked frail but joyful. He began with his signature smile and said, "If you're watching this, I've gone home to be with the Lord." Gasps filled the room. Frances buried her face in her hands. "Don't weep for me," Jimmy said in the video. "Celebrate. I've run the race, I've fought the good fight, I've finished the course. And now, I go to see." The church was stunned. Many couldn't even hold their phones steady to record. Others stood in silent awe, whispering to each other things like, "He knew, and he wanted this moment to comfort us." The message ended with Jimmy singing a few lines of Amazing Grace, his voice quivering, but still powerful enough to echo through the wall. Outside the church, crowds gathered for hours even after the service ended. Makeshift memorials popped up near the church gate. People lit candles, laid flowers, and shared testimonies of how Jimmy's sermons saved them from addiction, depression, or even suicide. One woman, who had flown in from Texas, said through tears, "I was about to take my own life in 1994. I turned on the TV and saw Jimmy preaching about God's mercy. I dropped the pills and got on my knees instead. That's why I'm here." Others recalled meeting him in person at camp meetings or revivals, and how he always took time to listen and pray, no matter how large the crowd. Some even shared rare autographs and photos, which quickly went viral across Facebook and Instagram. The entire internet for that day was focused on one thing: remembering the man who brought millions. Even critics, who had once lambasted Swaggart for past scandals, came forward acknowledging his resilience and dedication. "He stumbled, yes," one Christian blogger wrote, "but he got back up, and that's what made him human. That's what made him relatable. He didn't hide his flaws. By the end of the evening, the family worship center looked like a beacon of heavenly light. As the sun set behind it, the sky turned a soft gold, and many said it felt like God himself was smiling down on the gathering. Families prayed together, strangers embraced, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Frances Swaggart sat quietly with her head bowed, surrounded by love but completely alone in her grief. As people began to leave, the church's sound system played one last recording of Jimmy preaching. "Don't you give up on God," his voice declared, "because he won't give up on you." And with that, the tribute came. But in truth, it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning of a new chapter, a legacy reborn through tears, prayers, and love. But in truth, it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning of a new chapter, a legacy reborn through tears, prayers, and love. It was a beginning of a new chapter, a legacy reborn through tears, prayers, and love. But in truth, it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning of a new chapter, a legacy reborn through tears, prayers, and love. But in truth, it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning of a new chapter. Wasn't an ending. It was a beginning of a new chapter, a legacy reborn through tears, prayers, and love. But in truth, wasn't an ending. It was a beginning.